Hello again. Growth by acquisition. So if you want to accelerate the growth in your company, an acquisition might be the way to go about it. And there are different things that you can think about as to what you want to achieve. It's important that you set your objectives first and foremost as to what you're trying to gain by your acquisition. Sometimes an acquisition target just happens to come across your radar and you think, gosh, that's a jolly good idea, and you crack into it without actually thinking through what you're trying to achieve. Different objectives that one may come across is access to new markets, geography, technology. There may be benefits to that. If there's a region of the country that you could expand into, an opportunity might arise, and that could accelerate your growth into that region without having to do it organically. It may be that you want some new customers or suppliers, and you know that there's a target out there with some key relationships that could be quite useful for you. Key staff or assets. I mean, plant and machinery. If there's plant and machinery in a company or a business which is not been performing well, there might be an opportunity to pick something up at a good price. Key staff. Interestingly, actually, we do some work. We've done some work in the computer games sector, so a very different sector. But the people, the developers, are the actual key resource there, and so you'll see some amazing multiples paid for companies that are not necessarily performing well because they've got staff and developers there that could be very useful going forwards. And that's always an interesting one, because normally companies won't pay over the odds for people businesses because people come and go, but we do see it in technology space with developers. Increased revenue is another one. It may be that you're on a bit of a buy and build strategy. You sometimes see different sectors. Telecoms is one. If you've got sectors there where there's a recurring revenue stream, you've got companies that sign up to nice customer contracts where there's a recurring revenue for 2 or 3 years and maybe beyond that. Then there's scope to buy and build. So you actually buy a small company at a multiple of profits, bolt that onto your company, integrate it well, and suddenly the multiple that might be paid for your company is a bit more, so you've made money instantly. Or it may be a strategic acquisition. It may be that you're buying a brand, you're buying somebody else's reputation, somebody else's history, or you're actually taking a competitor out of the marketplace. So there's umpteen reasons as to why people do it. It's important that you just know why you're doing it and you keep that goal in mind. There are different ways that you can go about it. You can do an asset purchase or a share purchase, and the principal difference between the two is that when you do an asset purchase, you can pick and choose which assets, which liabilities you take on or leave behind. There's certain laws around what you can do, and I'm sure that Luke could get up here and speak for hours in relation to 2P transfers and the consequences of that. But asset purchase generally allows you to pick and choose. You just need to be careful that you do actually end up buying what you wanted to buy. And so you need to do your homework there. The share purchase, on the other hand, you'll end up buying the whole company, lock, stock and barrel, skeletons in cupboard, and everything that goes with it. But that can be a neater process. You can protect against the issues that you find through the due diligence process. You will employ advisors to help you with that, and what you don't need to worry about is any sort of dealing with third parties in the sense of IP assignments or particular transfers of particular title to assets. But a bit like the asset purchase, you still need to think about whether there are any third party consents that might be required when you take on a share purchase and you're actually just changing the owners. You might think, well, nothing really changes. Sometimes it does if you're actually after that key customer or that key supplier, and that was the reason for your acquisition to start with. Sometimes you can come across what's known as change of control provisions within those key documents. So we just need to be careful that we find what's there for you and that it actually does go back and meet the objectives that you were trying to set for yourselves. So again, just like when I said about selling a company and getting yourself prepared to sell your company, it's key when you're making an acquisition that you put the right advisors around you to help you do that. And it may be that you've got people on board or in your team or even you yourself have got a lot of experience in this regard, and that's good, and that might save you some of this and some of the costs. But typically what I say to people is you start with the basic stuff. you get in there and you root around and you do some commercial and operational due diligence. And there's a lot of that if you're a bit snazzy yourselves in terms of the operation and what you're looking to get out of it, that you can get in there and do a good amount of due diligence yourself. There might be times where you need to employ specialist advisors in terms of customer feedback and things of that nature. And I've certainly seen it where some of the reports have come through because you think, wow, this target is particularly exciting and they make a lot of profit, and then the reports come back to show that actually the customer satisfaction is not that brilliant, and you've been overcharging, and the target's been overcharging its customers. So a degree of that profitability could fall away quite quickly. You'd look at things like the internal processes within the company, and you're looking at the bigger picture here, because what you're trying to work out is, okay, this target's gonna meet my criteria in terms of why I'm doing it, but is it gonna integrate well? Because the last thing you want to do is buy something that is going to cause you a bigger headache when you try and integrate it with your existing company. And as I mentioned earlier, even if you're buying an asset, doing it by an asset purchase, so you're picking and choosing, and you may be taking some customer contracts, and that's all you're after. Well, if that is the essence of the business, then the staff will come too, and then you need to weigh up how does that fit within your organisation, and is that going to cause you issues? Financial due diligence, you typically have your accounting or your tax advisors to be crawling all over the financial information that's being provided to you, so that actually you can be sure, or as sure as you can be, that the target again will meet your financial objectives and help you to grow in the way that you wanted it to, and not end up creating a bit of a hole in the bucket for you. And then legal due diligence. Legal due diligence typically follows the first two, unless you're on a particularly tight timescale. Typically the commercial and financial due diligence would flow before the legal stuff. The legal stuff is the boring bits, and we'd look through the contracts and point out if we need some third-party consents, whether there are any sort of underlying issues there that might cause you a bit of a headache, and work out how we can best protect against it. And typically with legal issues you can protect against it either by some sort of reorganisation, some sort of shaping beforehand if the seller hasn't done that, or with some form of protection for you afterwards that we can build into the legal documents. And moving on to the actual transaction itself, particularly at the smaller end of the scale, the issues that I've seen there are when people don't take advice or are ill-advised because they've gone with the lawyer they've always used, the chap that helped them with their last lease, or the guy that they've known through a friend or another business acquaintance, but they're not sufficiently, they don't do this sort of thing for a living. And that can cause problems because you end up going up blind alleys. And again, if the guys are trying to save money and keeping their lawyers or accountants and tax advisors on a fairly tight leash, that can cause problems and lead to aborted transactions, which again is hugely frustrating for both the acquirer, the seller, the relationships going forwards, and the advisors too. So make sure the seller is properly advised, because that will smooth the process. Don't think you're going to pull the wool over somebody's eyes and you're going to get away with blue murder because they've got a bad lawyer. It won't happen. You just waste a lot of time and you'll end up extremely frustrated through the process. I did a transaction a couple of years ago, and it was a company that had been brought to market. It wasn't really ready for it. The advisors on the other side were not brilliant. We, through the financial, commercial and legal due diligence, the buyer had formed an opinion as to what he was going to take from the transaction and the commercial rewards it was going to give him. We unearthed an awful lot of legal problems, but the commercial rationale for doing the deal still stacked up. It took 2 years to come together, so instead of a 3-month project, that was a 2-year project. So you can imagine what cost that had in terms of financials and emotional and relationship costs. The transaction is actually turned out to be hugely successful, but again, it could have been so much easier if the other side had been properly advised. As it was somewhat painful, but it's paid off now. And as I said earlier, you need to plan for that integration. Once you've bought this business or the company, how's it going to fit within your group? How are the people going to interact? Are there different sites that you now need to work with? Are you working over a geography that you didn't work before? All of that needs to be factored in, because ultimately you're looking to grow. Presumably you're looking to grow so that you become more sellable as a company yourself. And you won't if there's disparate parts that you've got around the patch. You need to integrate it. And so often you see that an awful lot of money and time has been spent pulling together reports telling you what's wrong with the business that you're buying, what could be better with it, how it might integrate, and then nothing happens. You do the deal and everybody cracks on, and you don't take the rewards from the acquisition that you could have taken. You haven't integrated it properly, and you therefore don't achieve the exit ultimately that you want to achieve. So take it all on board, take your time, be properly advised, and grow through acquisition. That's it.